Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, The Modelling Novice. This is episode 2 of my first ever layout build, Fir Tree Halt. So today's episode is going to be mostly about laying track. Now obviously to start, we're going to be using an underlay, and as I mentioned in the last episode, I have some of this nitrile material. Now I don't exactly know what's going to happen with this, so I need to do a test to make sure that I know how to stick it firmly to the board and that the ballast is going to stick to it. So what's the plan? Well, typically you'd use something like PVA glue. But the problem is that if this is not porous enough to accept the PVA glue, I'm going to require to use something else. And I have got some of this contact adhesive, which in a pinch should stick this to the board. However, I don't know what ballast is going to be like. Now, I have some of this, which is just like an ore of some kind. So I'm going to just use that as a test for now. I won't actually be using that for ballast. This is just something I've got lying around. So first of all, I'm going to see if it sticks to each other. It sticks down. And then I'm going to do a little sample of ballast on top. Sprinkle on a little bit of this. Now, I am of course going to drop any excess back into the bag. So that's the PVA done. Let's see what this contact adhesive is like. Now, it does say that it requires 24 hours for a full cure, but generally speaking, maximum bond strength, wait approximately 2 minutes before joining surfaces. Oh, that's got a strong smell. Probably should be doing this in a ventilated area, but needs must. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to dry, come back in 24 hours and see what the results are. Okay, so it's just over 12 hours later, so this technically has another 12 hours to cure, but it should be mostly dry already. So, as you can see, it doesn't look fantastic. However, the PVA has worked perfectly fine, which is fantastic, which means I can certainly use the standard PVA technique for ballast. Now, big test. Okay. That is not the best. There was a bit of resistance that hasn't really come apart. I should say it has come apart, I should say. That's offering resistance. So, looks like I have my plan. Contact adhesive to stick that to the baseboard, and then PVA glue to do the ballasting on top. Okay, so now I have a plan of action for my underlay. So I already have started some of the cutting up, but I still have a little bit more to do. Now, I've also got ready for the next section, collection of acrylic paints, which will help start with, because I'm also going to do some weathering of the track, and also need to think about ballasting as well. Now, as you can see here, I've cut out a larger hole, and this is so I can get access to the power clip from underneath. That is going to be quite important because I'm not doing any solder wiring in regards to powering the track, as I think that most beginners are not going to try something like that at first. So I want to see, is it possible that you can do something relatively discreet and not have to do that and just use the standard power technique of power clip or a power track. And one thing I've got to help me with that is I've recently been gifted a bag of goodies from a friend of mine who was actually building their own layout. Now, as well as a couple of points, they've given me a couple of bags of these. And these are just various different trees, which I'm pretty sure a few of them I can use on this layout. Now, another thing that my friend Kevin is capable of doing is laser engraving and 3D printing. And as a little gift, he's 3D printed me this little cottage. Now, I might use this as a kind of station house, possibly, or maybe just as a little cottage over here. I'm not yet decided on that. But that's going to be another little fun project to add to this. And of course, being gifted, don't pay for it. I am going to start making a tally of costs, certainly what I'm making and what you might be potentially spending if you don't actually use the same kind of techniques as I do. Now, I am coming up with a bit of a workaround in regards to the curves. It is going to be a bit more awkward than using cork, so if you are doing this for the first time, cork would probably be better than my money saving attempt. So what else have I bought then? I've obviously got some nail tacks, a couple of tubs of ballast, although I severely doubt that this is going to be enough for the next stage. Now, these lengths I can typically get 3 out of one of these squares with a little bit of offcut. That's not going to be a problem because over at the engine shed, that is going, the offcuts, I get a piece, are effectively going to sit between the tracks to build it up to at least make a concrete base. This section here is actually going to be for the level crossing. And I'm just using a cheap second-hand kit I bought on eBay, like that, which just clips into a standard Hornby R600 piece of track. Because obviously, the starter set I bought was Hornby, the rest of the step track that I bought over the years is also Hornby. That's what I'm using right now. Rather frustratingly, these pieces are not an exact length. So when it comes to laying it down, I'm going to have to trim to length, and I'm probably going to have to partly assemble the track to make sure that it all lines up properly. So that is the underlay cut. I'm now going to start placing pieces under the track and start cutting pieces to size and to length, especially over the curves. Then I'm going to start gluing everything in place. As you can see, this is appearing to be a bit of a time-consuming process. The whole thing took about 2-3 hours and I was pretty mentally exhausted by the end of it. This was quite difficult and very awkward thing to do. So yeah, I wouldn't actually recommend this. Cork tends to come in either a complete square, quite large, or in a roll, which would have made this job much easier. I'm also going to fill up any little gaps or anything with a few of the offcuts, just to make sure that I can at least get a complete section of underlay complete. I have also decided to extend the siding at the rear of the layout. Now, a typical length of R600 Hornby track will actually overhang this by some margin. So I've got an old second-hand piece that's missing a fish plate, and I'm just going to cut that down to size and fit that at the end there. Okay, so that is the underlay finished. I've got to be honest, I'm not majorly happy with it. I think I would have probably been better off using cork. It would have been a lot simpler, but the material was free, so I'm just going to suck it up and see how it goes. Now, obviously I've had to do a bit of MacGyvering and odd engineering to essentially cut out odd sections and fill in gaps as best as possible. Not the easiest material to work with at all, but it is now at a point where it is at least finished. So next, I'm going to get the track back on top. I'm going to weather the track. I'm not going to nail it down until after I've weathered, because what I'm going to do is to put a base layer of PVA glue under the area of the points so that I can ballast those sections first, so I don't have to pour PVA mixture into the points and end up potentially stopping them from working. Weathering track is quite a simple but effective way of creating realism on your model railway. It's incredible what a small amount of paint can do to transform plasticky sleepers and scenic items into lifelike replicas of the real thing. One of the most common products I've seen used by many modelers is an acrylic colour called Sleeper Grime by Railmatch.
who make all sorts of railway specific paints, including LMS Crimson Lake, BR Blue and many more. It's available in an 18mm pot or in a small aerosol, which is great for covering larger layouts. But for me, as I've already spent my money on a range of cheap acrylics from Hobbycraft, I'm going to be recreating the colour at home. From stock photos, this looks like a brown tinted grey, so I start by mixing up a mid-tone grey before adding some brown to this mix. Then, using a relatively fine brush, I apply this to the rails and sleepers. I'm not too worried about getting excess on the tops of the rails, as this will be easy to clean with the track rubber once dry. I'm also painting in the detail parts of the level crossing and weathering the buffer stops for the sidings. I'm taking care around the points as I don't want to get paint on contact point between the switching blades and the main rails. As I'm running DC power, any paint will insulate the rails, preventing power from transferring to the next section of track. I have to say I'm finding this step rather therapeutic. I'm not naturally artistically inclined, and I've never held a paintbrush other than a household decorating one in about 15-16 years at least. Nevertheless, I felt a sense of timelessness as I unintentionally burnt the midnight oil here to get the first layer down. You will have noticed that I've covered the rails at the end of the sidings because logos are not going to stop here. These little used rails would be much more rusty in real life. The engine shed, however, is not getting the same treatment. I have painted the inside of the rails, but the sleepers will eventually be covered in a clay posing as concrete and so will not be visible, so doing these is not really very necessary. I will admit, my initial mix here was not brown enough, and as it dried those warmer tones muted even further to make it very cold looking. To rectify this, I've mixed some of the brown with an acrylic thinner, often used to dilute the paint for airbrushing. This diluted mix has been loosely painted over the top. Once that is dry, I will turn my attention to detailing, this time using a dry brushing technique. First, using white, I'll wipe the brush on some kitchen towel to remove most of the paint before gently applying the brush lightly over the sleepers. This will pick out some of the detail and the print work in the plastic. To mute this out again, I'll dry brush with a lighter brown and orange mix and then a darker brown on top. The crossing gates have also been dry brushed to give a grime effect on the pristine white factory finish. In between dry brushing layers, I've also smoothed out the roadway with filler to create a more natural slope from the underlay. I've started listening to podcasts while working on painting the rails. My cast of choice here is the Model Rail Replacement podcast, as can be seen on my phone screen, although many others are available. Not a plug, I'm not linked to them, but I do like listening to them while working on the layout. The last step is to add a light rust colour to the chairs, which are the clamps that hold the rails onto the sleepers. Using an ultra fine brush, I apply a rust colour, a mix of red, orange and brown. This colour is also added in patches to the sidings and to the buffer stops. Okay, so that is the track weathered. Now, as you can see, I have slightly taken it apart, ready for the next step. But before I did that, I did have a quick check through of everything, make sure that everything works, all of the connections are okay. Did have a little bit of trouble with one or two of the points, but a quick scraping and clean off of the contact points, and they are all fine, so trains run okay on it. So now we're going to move on to the next step, which is securing the track down. Okay, so what's the plan? Well, first I'm going to start over on the front side of the layout. I'm going to start with this piece here, this section here. So we've got the crossing and the engine shed siding points. So what that's going to entail is that on this section, I'm going to put down PVA base. Also going to glue this in place with some contact adhesive. And then with everything all set and lined up, pour the ballast in and allow that to set, and then move on to the next section. So let's get started. Now, as you can see, I have actually marked out in pencil where the ends of the points are. There's a plastic cap in here, if I remember from the last time I used this. Contact adhesive. Now, I did make sure to clean everything beforehand. So line up with the point motors. Place. Good. Next actually mixed the ballast 2 to 1 light to dark. Now I'm going to sprinkle gently a little bit. Clean brush. Brush everything in between these little bits. Cap pin. Make it slightly easier on yourself and get it to pop at all, but I don't have one to hand. Okay, so that is the end of today's video. Now, I'm rather happy with how things have turned out, particularly with the weathering side of things. I mean, nothing's perfect, but actually it's actually come up with a pretty good effect. I haven't really put that many tacks in, but I've just tacked each section just to make sure that everything's secure. I'll probably go back over that at a later point. You may have noticed that I've not touched the engine shed. That is because I still need to cut out a hole for the inspection pit. But that is obviously going to come in a future video. Now, if you've liked what you've seen so far, please give a like and subscribe to the channel to see as this build progresses. If you are an inexperienced modeler, you can continue watching me cock things up and still get something out of it, you know, so don't be afraid to have a go. And if you're an experienced modeler, please continue to laugh at my expense at the mistakes I keep making. So with that, I'll leave you to it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.